7 years have passed since the ice swallowed everything she loved, since the cry of her cub vanished into the cold and the world turned quiet. But something stirs in her now, an ache sharper than the wind, a pull deeper than instinct, as if the memory she never let go of has finally clawed its way back through time, calling to her across the endless white with a voice no distance could silence and no logic could explain. And without knowing why, without needing to, she begins to dig, desperately, violently, through the frozen years, through grief turned stone, chasing something impossible that refuses, even after all this time, to let her go. Each morning began the same, under a sky too wide to hold the past. Her heavy paws, pressing into the snow with practiced calm, tracing the same routes across the frozen world, not out of necessity, but habit. Rituals carved from what used to be. She sniffed the wind, not just for prey, but for something nameless, and lingered a second too long near the crevasse where the ice once gave way, though the scent was long gone. When she rested, it was always facing north, as if some part of her still believed he might come from that direction, still believed in the shadow of a smaller shape at her side. The ice was quiet, but inside her there was a constant murmur, the memory of a heartbeat against hers, of warmth that didn't come from the sun, and though she had not cried in years, grief clung to her like frost in her fur, unseen, but never gone. It happened too fast for the world to notice, but slow enough for her heart to break in pieces she would never find again. The sound of cracking ice, sudden and sharp, the startled yelp of her cub slipping through the split, beneath his dancing paws, his eyes wide with confusion and fear as he disappeared into the black below. She lunged, reckless and roaring, but the void had already taken him, swallowed him whole with the merciless finality of frozen water sealing. Shut! She screamed his name into the silence until her voice was raw, tore at the ice with bleeding claws. But there was no answer, only the wind, only her own breathing growing louder in the absence of his. And then stillness, the kind that doesn't come from peace, but from a soul stunned into silence. The days that followed stretched into years, and she was no longer the mother she had been, but something smaller inside, retreating, unreachable, wandering not to live, but to keep moving, because stopping meant remembering, and remembering meant falling into the same crack that had taken him. She no longer played, no longer dreamed, and even the moonlight lost its shimmer. The world around her unchanged, yet colder than it had ever been, as if it too knew that something sacred had been broken and never came back. Let's take a short pause, and I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had someone, maybe a person, maybe even an animal, remember you after years apart? A look, a sound, something that said I know you even after time had done its best to erase the bond. If stories like this speak to something in you, make sure to follow. There's so much more ahead that will touch the heart. It was just another morning, shaped by snow and silence when it came. Faint at first, then sharper. A scent laced with something she hadn't felt in years, something that struck like lightning through the fog of habit, and her body froze mid-step. Ears, twitching, breath caught not from fear, but from recognition. It couldn't be. It shouldn't be. And yet every cell in her being screamed yes, screamed now. She stood there trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of what this could mean, of everything it could break open again if she was wrong. Maybe it was memory playing tricks. Maybe it was just wind and longing braided into illusion. But then it came again, clearer this time. A sound, low and broken, echoing across the ice like a name, whispered into a dream, and suddenly standing still felt more dangerous than hope. Doubt clawed at her. What if he's gone? What if it's not real? What if you dig through all the pain only to find nothing? But something deeper than thought moved her, something buried with him, now rising back to the surface. And so she ran, not like a wanderer, but like a mother again, the rhythm of her paws louder than fear, back to the place where it all ended, or so she'd believed. And when she reached the ridge and smelled him truly, unmistakably, Her body moved before her mind could speak, clawing at the ice not with desperation, but with a force born from the unbearable hope that maybe, just maybe, love had not been swallowed forever. And then, from beneath, cracked and trembling, came the impossible voice that shattered everything she had come to accept and rebuilt her in a single heartbeat. The first crack split the silence like a breath held too long, sharp and sudden, and she froze, not out of fear, but reverence, as if the very earth had parted to return something sacred. Steam curled up from the fracture, the scent now undeniable, and through the thinning ice, she saw movement. Cautious, slow, uncertain. Then eyes, wide and dark and impossibly familiar, meeting hers with a stillness that broke her more than any scream could have. He was older now, changed by time, by survival. But the way his gaze locked on hers, it was him, all of him, the same pulse that had once pressed against her side in sleep, the same soul she had carried inside her before he ever touched snow. She didn't roar or cry. Her voice caught somewhere too deep for sound, and instead she leaned forward, gently, as if afraid to wake a dream. Her breath, fogging the thin wall between them. He hesitated, only for a heartbeat. But then he moved too, slowly, instinctively, pressing his face to the fracture where hers waited. And in that single moment of stillness, something ancient stirred, a recognition that needed no proof, no explanation. The world around them vanished, and all that remained was the quiet thunder between two beings who had never stopped listening for each other through all the years, all the silence, all the ice. And in that fragile, breathless contact, everything shifted. Not the world, but the center of it, returning at last to where it belonged. At first, every step felt like walking through memory, tentative, fragile, as if one wrong move might shatter the spell. But, slowly, something began to soften between them. He brushed against her side not out of fear, but choice, and she didn't flinch when he did, only turned her head slightly, just enough to feel his warmth, just enough to remember what it meant to be known again. The first time she nudged him with her nose, he didn't pull away, and when he leaned into her, she closed her eyes. Not from exhaustion, but peace. They moved through the snow, not as they once had, but in quiet rhythm, side by side. No longer looking for what was lost, but carrying it within them. She watched him sometimes when he slept, curled like he used to, and he watched her too, caught her reflection in the ice and didn't look away. Days passed, then more, and the stillness, between them filled with small things, a playful paw against hers, a shared breath at sunrise, a look that said, "I remember," without speaking. The world remained cold, the wind sharp, but something inside them had thawed, something that time and silence had buried but not broken. And in that slow return to life, they discovered this truth. The bond they shared had never ended, only waited, quiet, patient, unyielding beneath the surface until they were ready to hold it again. Some bonds don't need to be spoken. They survive beneath silence, beneath time, beneath all the things we think can break us. They wait, quietly, patiently, until the heart remembers, until the moment is right, and then they return, not as they were, but as something even deeper. What was lost is not always gone. Sometimes it's just waiting for a voice, a touch, a breath, to awaken again and remind us that love, the real kind, never truly lets go.